if you're in a band or you're a musician, which I'm sure a lot of people who pay attention to what we're doing are, the game has changed quite a bit for people who play in bands, especially metal. And just because of streaming and the rise of, Spotify and Apple Music, and there's there's a lot of nuance to this conversation, because a lot of people long for the days of the record or the CD or the cassette. But there's something to be said for the new world we live in, the streaming world. And the thing that's cool about it is anyone kind of has instant access to it, right? So if you're an indie band, you can record a song and have it on Spotify pretty quickly. I mean, it's not too difficult to get a song posted on Apple Music and Spotify. And the other day, I went to see the Bobby Lees for Brutal Planet Media, Brutal Planet Mag, and I happened to ask this guy in the audience, because Bobby Lees are they're not a big band, they're not a well-known act, they're pretty indie, and I cover them because they're on Patton's Ipecac label, and we just BPM covers Ipecac stuff. Like when Ipecac releases stuff, we try to cover it. Me being a huge Patton fan and just Ipecac hosting a lot of bands that are kind of relevant right now as far as alternative metal goes, or just music in general. Bobby Lees are more of an indie punk band, but Ipecac obviously has Bungle, they have Melvins, they have Tomahawk, they have Mike Patton's last band, Dead Cross, and then Spotlights, actually, which is a really killer band that opened the Geek Show. So at this show, the Bobby Lee show, I happened to turn to this guy and I just asked him, "Hey, how did you find out about this show?" And he said, "Spotify." He said, I found this band through a playlist I like on Spotify, and I followed the band. And when they were playing locally, I got a notification saying, "Hey, this band is this band's playing locally, this band that you listen to." And that's how he found out about the show. So for me, it kind of made me pay a lot more attention to what's going on with the world of Spotify. And I followed this guy, Rick Beato. And if you're a YouTube person, you probably know who he is. But I found this is a short little.
I saw something in the news last week that Apple Music had its first song with over 1 billion plays, which was The Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. And I thought, it's kind of weird.
Now, granted, the listening audience on Spotify is a little bit different. Like, I am not an Ed Sheeran fan, and that's someone who gets a lot of plays on Spotify. I don't hate the guy. He's a good songwriter. He's talented. It's just not really my thing. But anyway, listen.
Because Spotify and YouTube have many songs over 1 billion plays. And I looked it up. They each have over 400 songs with over 1 billion plays. And I thought, well, Apple Music's been around since 2015. Spotify's been around since 2008, and YouTube since 2005, 2006. So it's not that surprising. So then I thought, well, why don't I download the API, which is the information available for developers from Spotify, because they give it to you. And
I don't want to bury the lead here, but he does. He does eventually get to the point where he's talking about something that's relevant to metal. So just bear with me. This is good stuff.
It shows you a list of the top 500 artists. It shows you how many monthly listeners they have. A monthly listener is someone that's listened within the last 28 days. And a listen is constituted by 30 seconds of listening to a song. Okay, let's take a look at the demographics from Spotify. Age 18 to 24 is 26%. Age 25 to 34 is 29%. 35 to 44 is 16%. 45 to 54 is 11%. And 55 and over, my demographic, is 19%. That means 54% of Spotify listeners are between 18 and 34, and the rest, 46%, are between 35 and 100, let's say. Okay, what about
Hey, if Rick's 55 and over, that gives me hope for the future, right? Like he seems pretty vital and coherent for someone in his age group, and I love it. I love it. I watch the guy all the time. I have the utmost respect for him and what he does. He's obviously a very experienced music guy. He knows how to play music. He knows how to record music. He knows the ins and outs of things like EQ and compression and like the real nitty gritty of actual music production. His channel is amazing. Not that he needs our help, but if you don't subscribe to him and you're into music at all, like give him a look.
The gender demographics, 56% are female on Spotify and 44% are male. YouTube skews a little bit more male, I think. I'm not positive of that, but if I had to guess, that's what it would be. Okay, so what are the top artists by monthly listeners? Remember, it's people that have listened in the last 28 days. Okay, number one on the list is The Weeknd with 108 million monthly listeners. That's not surprising. What's surprising is Ed Sheeran is number two at 86 million. And what's surprising about that is The Weeknd is 20% higher than Ed Sheeran in monthly listeners. That's a lot. If you take into account that 22 million difference between the two would put you on the charts at about 230 or so on that chart of monthly listeners. So 22 million more is almost as many monthly listeners as the Beatles have. The difference between 1 and 2. That's shocking. Then you have Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus, Rihanna, Justin Bieber, Shakira, Ariana Grande, David Guetta, and Bad Bunny to round out the top 10. Number 10, Bad Bunny has 71 million monthly listeners. Okay, pretty interesting. Then I decided to divide this up.
That's not surprising.
Into genre. So I took the top 40 artists.
What is surprising is
being
that Bad Bunny isn't higher on the list because everyone in Latin America listens to that guy.
Karol G. Okay, so on this chart, as you can see, 45% of them are pop artists, 30% are rap artists. Then coming in at 7.5% are both EDM and pop rock artists. We'll talk about this in a second. 5% are R&B and 5%.
Notice metal is nowhere in that pie chart.
Are Latin pop. Okay, so which artists are which? What are the rock pop artists? So the first one that came up is Coldplay at 14 with 65 million monthly listeners. They're a pop rock band. They used to be a rock band. They're a pop rock band now. And then Imagine Dragons number 18 and Maroon 5 at number 26. Those are the only things that resemble rock at all. And they're really not rock. They're rock pop.
I would put Coldplay in like adult contemporary.
If you were to say Latin pop are a couple different people here. You have J Balvin at number 34 and Karol G at number 40. They're Latin pop. I guess you could say Shakira is pop. I would say Shakira is really pop. And then I created a chart as to when they released their first record or when they came to prominence. And this is kind of interesting. 57.6% were from 2010 to 2020. 37.4% were from the year 2000 on. And 5% were from 1990 on. The only people that came up in the 1990s that were in the top 40 are Eminem and Shakira. Those are the only people.
Wow.
The really interesting thing is that no one from the last 3 years is on this. Okay, so where are the big TikTokers?
So that's interesting point that he makes right there too, is the people that actually got into this top 40 really had to work for it. You know, they didn't just show up there.
On here. You hear how TikTok drives the music industry, drives Spotify playlists, drives this, drives that. It's the only place you can make money is by having a viral video on TikTok. Well, there is no TikTokers in the top 40 in the charts on Spotify. If you keep going down the list, eventually at 85, you hit Ice Spice. It really broke on TikTok. And then you go down a little further and you hit Pink Pantheress at 95. But to find somebody that really broke big on TikTok, just right on TikTok, nowhere else, and it's Jake. Now, Jake has 30,763,000 monthly listeners, and he's 119 on the Spotify charts. Well, you know what 120 is? The Beatles. It's unbelievable. The Beatles are 120. They're below Jake. Okay. Okay, so where are the rock artists, you might say?
Here we
Okay,
go.
well, if you go into the 40s, you find Elton John, and then a little bit below Elton John is Queen. I've talked about Queen and Elton John having huge multi-generational listeners, right? That are young. My kids know who both of them are, and they listen to them. And then obviously people my age listen to them, which makes sense. That's why they have so many monthly listeners, because you have to have young people in there, because Spotify, half the people are 35 and under that listen to Spotify. So that makes sense that these are multi-generational artists. Where's the first metal act?
Here we go.
Linkin Park really is
Linkin Park.
way down
I mean,
at 82.
As far as metal goes, or heavy music anyway, that's about as pop as it gets. So that does make sense.
35 million monthly listeners. That's a lot of monthly listeners, but that's your first metal band on there. So metal does not really occupy that many spaces on this list. Then you get Metallica much, much lower. So then you might say, where are the Foo Fighters on here? Well, the Foo Fighters are down at 20 million monthly listeners, and they're way down at number 253. And number 252 are the Killers. So rock music is just not that big on this whole chart. And then you might say, well, that's because the charts on Spotify, the people that are at the top of the charts get the most listens because they're the front leading people on the format, which is true. So if rock bands had bigger songs, they would be more at the top of the charts. Okay, well then how do they get bigger songs if they're not at the top of the charts, right? Because the rock playlists have a much smaller share of the market. So you really can't break into this thing. It's very difficult. Another glaring thing to me is the fact that it's going to be very difficult for AI artists to break in. Now, I just made this video where I said that AI artists are going to be able to be developed by record labels and by streaming platforms like Apple Music and Spotify. But it's not going to be that easy if you look at this list. Why? Because it took years for these artists to get at the top of the platform. Ed Sheeran, even The Weeknd, Taylor Swift, these people have been around for a long time. They really have. Miley Cyrus,
Miley Cyrus
a long time. Justin Bieber, they've been around
20 years
forever.
ago.
They need to develop live followings. They need to be real people to interact with their fans. And that's the one thing about AI artists, is that they're not going to be able to really interact with their fans, at least on the human level. So for all the people that are worried about AI taking over, I think this list is pretty telling. That doesn't mean that AI artists can't come in, because the pop music is easiest to be mimicked by AI. But I wouldn't be too worried about it if I were an artist out today. There's other areas that I would be way more worried with than in the music sphere. I found this incredibly interesting, and I thought you might. Leave me a comment. Let me know.
So that is something that, while it's not completely metal related, I left watching that with two thoughts. And the reason I wanted to share it on this stream is, number one, there's a huge opportunity, obviously, for rock and metal artists to break into that. Obviously, people like Metallica, Maiden, established rock artists already kind of have a leg up. But the second part is the AI thing, because I've heard a lot of people talking about AI and the threat of AI music and it taking over and everything. And I like what he said there, because he kind of shows you that it's not going to be that easy. All the people in the top pop spots are people like The Weeknd. Whether you like him or not, that guy is a talented dude. He's been making his own music before he even broke into the mainstream. He was a great producer. The guy has an amazing voice and just a knack for writing good songs. I'm saying he deserves his slot at the top. And, artists like Coldplay or Imagine Dragons, who kind of dominate the rock sphere. I'm not a huge fan of either of those bands either, but they have some good songs. They both have decent songs, and it's at the very least, it's music that's written by people, and it's not all computerized. And, there's some actual feeling that goes into it. And I'll kind of end this off by just saying, so last night my son plays in a metal band, and it's very encouraging for me as like an old head, an old metal guy, to go to these little concerts, these little indie concerts, and see these kids moshing and like getting into heavy music still. There's still a huge, especially the way the world is right now, the level of anxiety and kind of all the crazy stuff that's going on internationally with, the escalation of potential nuclear war with Russia and the Ukraine and all the escalation that's happening with China and all these things. I'm optimistic in that I don't think that that's going to end badly. I think cooler heads will prevail, but I think that all that kind of stuff contributes to a need to kind of release this anxiety. And I see it with these kids, my son's age in the mosh pit, they're high school age kids getting that energy out. And they're just like we did when we were kids. They make sure to pick someone up if they fall down. They're not there to trample anyone. No one's trying to hurt each other. They are trying to hurt each other. It's a mosh pit. They're throwing elbows and legs and fists and shoving, but it's good natured fun. And I think it's a good outlet for the anxiety and the rage that you kind of have, not only at that age, but even in your 40s. So, I've always said I'll be that guy, drinking whiskey, listening to Slayer on his porch when I'm 85. It's nothing. I'm the same motherfucker I've been since I was 13. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but at least I'm consistent, right?